Hi. Don't change it just yet. I have a list here, and well, let me explain. My follow-up list regarding the DJI Spark. I've been using the Spark now for several weeks, and I've been taking some notes when I run into a key point that I want to share with you in a follow-up. Now, if you own a Spark, this list may be helpful, but if you don't own a Spark yet, and you're thinking Spark or Mavic, this list may also be helpful to you. So I'm going to make this a very quick video, very unglamorous. It's going to be a quick rundown with some follow-up notes. I hope you like it. So let's get into this list now. Now, there are two basic ways of getting video off of the DJI Spark. One is to leave the micro SD card in there and hook the USB cable that this comes with into the rear of here and plug it into the your computer. Now that sounds really convenient, but it comes at a cost, which I'll explain in a second. The other way to take video off of the DJI Spark is to remove the micro SD card and to plug it into, let's say, an adapter like this. Or if you have something that has a micro SD slot, you could probably plug it right into that directly. I like to use this adapter for some very good reasons. Well, one is my laptop only has a slot this big, but there's another good reason, and I'll explain that in a second. So there's two main benefits to removing the SD card from the Spark, plugging it into an adapter like this, and then plugging it into my computer. The first benefit is I get 80 megabytes per second transfer rate when I go directly from the micro SD card to my computer. If I use the Spark in that mode where I plug the cable from the Spark to my laptop and it turns this thing into like a USB drive in a sense, what happens is I only get 15 megabytes per second transfer rate. The other benefit is when I plug the micro SD card into this adapter has a little write protect switch on the side. So this is where I insert the micro SD card. This is where the little copper teeth are, and the write protect tab is down here. So if I make the write protect tab go this way, it will be write protected, meaning you cannot write to the SD card on here. What that means is when I insert this in my computer, it's a read-only card. The computer can't write to it, and if I have some really good drone footage I don't want to lose, it'll prevent the computer from writing over that or corrupting it or something like that. And related to that, if you use the Spark in USB drive mode, meaning you plug in the cable here and plug it into your laptop to read the files off of it, when you do that, the Spark is actually a read-write device, meaning you can actually write to the SD card. And so I don't really see any way to really write protect the data as you're copying it off, and I think it's just really good to take out the card and put it in here. Of course, if you need the convenience of plugging the cable in here and plugging it into your computer because it's easier, then that may be something you like, but it's going to take much longer. And I think, technically speaking, while I don't think the risk is huge, there is some more risk. If you have something wrong with your computer and it writes onto the card or damages your card or something, there is some risk there, so keep that in mind. So the next thing I noticed occurred when I bought some new batteries, and you might have seen this in the unboxing video, but basically I bought some new batteries, but I wasn't aware that the batteries themselves needed firmware updating. So I got out to the location where I was going to use these new batteries, and as I inserted them one by one into the drone as I was using them, each one needed to be updated. That caused me to use power on my smartphone, which goes down fairly quickly as I go through these batteries and use it with the drone, and it was just something I didn't expect. And I think generally speaking, you never know when you're going to get a firmware update, so before you leave the house, update all of your firmware, connect your remote up, do everything, let the software start up, do a check when you're at home to make sure all of your batteries and everything are updated with firmware. What that means with the batteries is insert each one into your device and check and just make sure that it works well and that there's no firmware updates. Now, if they're all at the same firmware level and you know that, you can probably just insert one before you leave the house. Just make sure there's no new battery firmware. If you notice there's new battery firmware, I'd recommend you go through all of your batteries to make sure that they are updated before you leave. It's not that it's impossible to do firmware updates when you're out there. It just uses more of your cell phone battery power, and if you don't have good reception or it takes a long time, it's just more of a pain. So update your firmware before you leave the home and check your batteries to make sure they're on the latest firmware before you go out and fly the drone. So while we're on the subject of batteries, I got a Fly More combo with 2 batteries. Pretty cool, right? Well, let's talk about that for a second. Flight time, by all accounts I've read, including my own and other people I've seen, it's pretty much about 12 minutes. You may get a little more or a little less depending on whether you're hovering a lot. My understanding is hovering actually uses more power. I'm guessing that's because hovering requires for it to remain in the same position and requires a lot more, effort energy-wise to remain, stable in that one position as opposed to when you're moving. Regardless, these things go quickly. So if you're going out in the field and you have a fly more combo, frankly, I like to round down there and say it's about 10 minutes per battery. And I think that I see that quite a bit. I think initially, I've done a lot of hovering when I've used the Spark, and I'd actually recommend that to folks. Just be gentle with it. If you don't know drones, take your time with it, do all the safety things, read about it, go slow with it. I really highly recommend that, and that means you're probably, if you're hovering, you're going to get, I'm guessing, about 10 minutes on average per battery. So if you get your new drone, and it's a beautiful sunny day, and you're thinking you're going to go out all day and use the drone and not have to charge batteries during the day to wait around for it, that's not going to be the case. You're basically going to get, with the Fly More combo, you're basically going to get 20 minutes of flight time. And that may sound like a lot of time, but it's not if you're learning. If you're learning, I have found, I want to take my time. I want to see how to even fly it first, but then I want to learn a little bit about the camera stuff, and that takes time. And when your time is interrupted because the battery's going out, it's a little inconvenient. When both batteries go out and your day's over until you charge them up and you got to wait around for them to charge up, that's maybe not something you want to have happen if you're, going out and you're planning to kind of do a lot of drone stuff for maybe, a couple of hours or at least an hour. So what I did is I bought a whole bunch more batteries. I bought 4 more batteries, so I had the Fly More combo and 4 batteries I bought. One went back to DJI. They're sending me a new one because there was something defective with that one. I was getting a code 130, which you probably saw in my unboxing video. I'll put a link below, and there is a link in my unboxing video description that takes you right to that part if you want to just see that part directly. So I got all these batteries. Let me tell you, I go through these batteries lightning fast. Like it goes by like that. So it's about 6 batteries, and you're thinking, wow, that's a lot of flight time. Well, I tell you, if you're going out with the drone, it may sound like a lot of time. It's actually sufficient for me now, but it goes by quickly. Now, maybe some folks, when they initially get their drone, they're going to spend a lot more time trying to learn it, but maybe after that, 2 batteries might be fine for the occasional photograph or video or something. So you be the judge of that. I'm just letting you know you're going to get about 10, maybe 12 minutes if you're lucky, flight time on each battery. That's pretty much the consensus I see. So just be prepared for that. Fly More combo means 20 minutes of flight time, and then you're going to have to recharge. And while we're still on the batteries here, batteries very important. These things have all the power. I want to talk about charging these things. Now, charging these things is fairly standard. You put them in the charger and they charge up, but they have a smart discharge technology where the batteries will self-discharge to below 70% after 10 days of non-usage. I got burned by this because I had charged batteries like 10 days prior and had not used the drone in that 10-day period. And I got out to this place where I wanted to use the drone, and I ended up finding out that every one of my batteries was at 60% at the start of the flight. And it's not only like a normal 60%, it's like 60% where it drops pretty quickly from there. I was lucky to get 5 minutes of flight time per battery on that day. I think it was less, actually. As soon as I got kind of like across this thing where I was flying it, it just said low battery, so I had to bring it back. And the battery was dropping pretty quickly at that point. So I think when you're on that 60% charge from the self-discharge, it's in a state where it's going to discharge pretty quickly if you're flying off those batteries. That's what I've noticed. So the moral of the story here is if you think you've charged your batteries because you did so about 10 days ago or more, and they're in your bag and they're ready to go, no, always check your batteries before you walk out that door charge them the night before if you're planning a day out. Just keep that in mind. That self-discharge will sneak up on you. You might read it in the manual when you first get the Spark, but then you're going to be reading so much other stuff and practicing and testing, you may forget about that, or it just may not be as important when you're, getting the Spark for the first time. I saw it, I thought, oh, okay, cool. I didn't think it would affect me, and I totally forgot about it. Got out there, 60% every one of them. So for my 6 batteries, I got maybe a half-hour flight time, and I don't even think it was that much. I mean, it was not the best flying experience. So as I mentioned earlier, I got a code 130 with one of these batteries. It's a good reason for you to test your batteries in the Spark when you get them brand new. Make sure they have the latest firmware, but also make sure you don't get that code 130. If you insert these in the Spark, you'll see on your on the Go 4 app, you'll see it'll say can't fly code 130 if that's what you're getting. Now, I've seen some people say that you can discharge the battery and then recharge it up and fix that problem. I did not test that out because I had already sent mine into DJI. They've sent me out a replacement battery free of charge, and it's taken a long time. It's been already like almost 2 weeks or something just to get that battery back. So if you bought a bunch of batteries, just make sure, like I said before, that the firmware is updated, but also put them in your Spark, start it up, and so you can see that it's working correctly and that the status looks good in the app. So the next thing may not apply to everybody, but I have a lot of rain in the area here, and I went out to fly the drone on a day where there was no rain, but it had rained recently, so the ground was a little moist and muddy in some areas. Now on takeoff, I was able to place this on a nice little dry patch of grass, and there's no issue there. But what I noticed is on landing, if it lands on something that is a little moist with grass or a little mud, it really does stick on the bottom here and on these little sensors here, and I really didn't want that. I don't want these sensors blocked because it needs these to kind of do all of its magic in terms of stability and that kind of thing. So on that day when I did that, I didn't have any tissue with me. I was out there and I didn't have like a little tissue or something. So you might want to bring a little terry cloth or tissue or something, just for some extra maintenance in case you need to like wipe something off there or whatever. Just a little thing I didn't have, and it was kind of inconvenient. I was like using my shirt to get the mud off there, and it's just something I wanted to throw your way. They do have little riser adapter legs, not at DJI as far as I know, but there's a company that has little riser adapter legs that you can actually hook onto here, and I've seen a couple different companies offer those things. You can probably just search on the web for those accessories and find them. I personally am fine with the way that it is, but I mentioned that if it's helpful. So for those of you who are familiar with the Spark, you'll know that it records the high quality video on the micro SD card that is inside the drone, and then it records like a lesser quality video in the video cache that's managed by the DJI Go 4 app that's on the smartphone. What I didn't know is that the cache on the phone is set to a relatively small value by default. And what happened to me is I was in the middle of a flight, and apparently it couldn't store the cached recording because it had hit the limit that was specified in the default settings. I had plenty of space on my smartphone, but the app was configured not to exceed a certain amount, and I was not aware of that until I ran into this issue. I actually don't use the cached footage that much, but I did want to have it in this particular case, and sometimes it's a good backup just in case something goes wrong with this. At least you have the lower quality one that's on the cache, which is not that bad for like cell phone usage and that kind of thing. So it was a real pain because like in the middle of the flight, I saw that and I didn't want to deal with it. So I waited until the next flight, and then I just adjusted the settings in the app to have a higher cache value. So if you're concerned about the same thing, you may want to look at the cache settings in the app if recording and saving the cached videos is important to you. While we're on the discussion of the cached video, I wanted to mention to you that I noticed that when I use the intelligent flight modes, I noticed this with at least Droney, the Droney setting where the drone goes away and takes a photo of you as it goes away. The cached version has sort of a built-in time lapse that DJI apparently adds for you. My guess is they add that for you so it looks kind of nicer and it's ready for social media off of your phone. The one that's on the drone here of the same shot, it doesn't have the time lapse built in. It just kind of goes up smoothly and down, and you can add time-lapse when you go to your video editing application. So when I first noticed that on the smartphone, I was thinking maybe interference with the signal was somehow negatively affecting the reception of the video, creating choppy video that happened to look like a perfect time lapse. But then eventually I figured out, because I kept seeing it do the same thing, that it was inducing a time lapse with the cached version of the recording, but not the one that's on here, which is fine with me because the cached one I'm generally not going to use. But if I do want to use it for social media and whatever, and if it has like, some time lapse built in there in the end, I'm fine with it. It's not a big deal. It's just something to keep in mind because when I first saw that, I thought something was malfunctioning. But it turns out that that's by design and meant to do that with the cached version. Now, there's been a couple times when I've captured drone footage on here, and then I get back here and I find out the file is corrupted on here. I'm not sure what that is yet. It may be caused by me turning off the drone power before pressing stop record, but I've done that a couple of times and have not seen the corruption issue. So I'm now kind of suspicious that maybe turning off the power of the drone before you press stop record may intermittently affect the video file. I'm not sure, but I've heard some other folks say that you'll lose the video if you don't press stop record before turning off the power. I haven't seen that firsthand, so maybe with all their firmware changes, the nature of this potential problem changes over time. This is all a guess on my part, but as a precautionary measure, I'd recommend pressing stop record before you power off the battery, and I can't say that will guarantee you'll never have a corrupt video file, but it may help reduce the risk of that happening. I think this brings up another point. If you're doing an important shot and you think you've got it, you might want to have some way when you're in the field of verifying that by like downloading the footage from the drone onto a laptop, making sure you got the shot you want, maybe even uploading it to the cloud or something if it's a really important thing, and not relying on the notion that it will be intact on here. I've just seen already 3 or 4 times I've come home and one of my several flights has its file corrupted. So now I want to talk about what I understand about the Mavic versus the Spark based on my experience with the Spark. I now understand more of those trade-offs that I considered before purchasing the Spark much better now that I've had a chance to use the Spark. How you doing there, little buddy? He wants me to say hello. How's it going? Little greeting there. Okay, hello, how's it going, guy? He's right down here. Hello, how are you? Okay, so the Mavic has a 3-axis gimbal. This has a 2-axis gimbal. So here's the first axis of this gimbal, and you can see it tilts left and right. The next axis of the gimbal is this tilt up and down. Now, I have gotten some fairly decent pan shots with this thing by, rotating it left and right. But I have to say, sometimes it's a little too fast or too jerky, and so I'm guessing that's where that third axis gimbal would help. I don't really feel that's a huge deal breaker for me at the stage I'm at with a drone, but it's something worth keeping in mind. Now, the other difference with the Spark and the Mavic is flight time. As I mentioned, with one of these Spark batteries, I'm lucky if I get 12 minutes of flight time, but I'd say it's probably more along the lines of 10 minutes. Now, these batteries are supposedly rated at 15 minutes, like if it's perfect conditions or something like that, but I never reach 15 minutes. Never, 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 never. So I don't know where they're getting those specs. Maybe they're flying the Spark in like a vacuum or something, but I'm not seeing 15 minutes. The DJI Mavic is rated close to about 30 minutes, but they have a qualification in there, calls it out at about 20 minutes. I'm guessing folks see a variation, but it's at least about twice the flight time, if not more, than the Spark. I don't find this yet to be an absolute deal breaker because I'm not sure how much I'm going to use this, and I'm not sure, how critical that is for me. But I will say, when I was coming up to speed with this and trying to learn and trying to practice with the camera and the gimbal and everything, the 10 minutes that I would get with this is so short. It's just over right away. So if you really want to do pro photography and have that extra gimbal and have the 4K footage and the longer flight time, and you really want to be able to practice some shots when you're set up some shots and work and try it over and over, and you kind of want to stay up there with one battery, in that case, you may want to be looking at the Mavic. So this is all kind of abstract discussion. It really depends on your needs, but I really think flight time matters. It doesn't mean that the short flight time of the Spark is bad or good, or the long flight time of the Mavic is bad or good. It's really about what your expectations are and what you're trying to accomplish. And so you look at it like this. The Fly More with the Mavic is going to give you 2 batteries. Let's say you get 20 minutes out of each battery, and that's 40 minutes, right? And I think it may even be a little more than that depending on how you fly it, right? But let's just say you're going to get 40 from that Fly More. Well, the Fly More with this, 2 batteries, you're talking 20 minutes. So there's a difference there. It's just something to keep in mind. For me, so far, it's not a deal breaker, but I've had to learn that I got to have a lot of batteries. So the other thing I want to bring up regarding batteries is they very often talk about how dainty this is and how small it is and light and oh goodness, my cell phone is bigger and all this kind of stuff. And the thing is, you got to keep in mind, if you're going to take this thing out with you and you're going to want to be flying for, more than 20 minutes, then you're going to need a bag of batteries. And that's going to add to the size, the bulk, the weight, and all that jazz. It's not a deal breaker for me, but just keep in mind that the Spark is not just the Spark. It's the Spark, the remote, your smartphone, as well as many batteries as you're going to need. And if you're going to want to have an hour's worth of flight time, you're probably going to want 6, 7 batteries. The next thing I wanted to talk about were these Polar Pro ND filters. Actually, this is a polarizer with an ND8 and an ND16. I got this at Best Buy. You can go to the Polar Pro website to kind of learn more about the products they offer. I actually got this for the ND filters. ND filters have a lot of purposes in photography. With the Spark, I am using them to keep that shutter speed down on bright days, and so far I've really liked the results from these. It's not a must-have if you're just starting out, but if you're really into the photography aspect of it, you may find it's essential for you to keep that shutter speed down and to just improve your video footage. All right, that's it for the unboxing video. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you found this information helpful. If you want to click the like button, I wouldn't be upset. And if you want to subscribe, that would be pretty awesome. And that's it from Ashley to you. Hope you have a wonderful week or a wonderful day or whatever it happens to be for you. And thanks so much for watching. Bye.